Hey everybody, how you doing? Happy Wednesday to you. Welcome to a midweek edition of 5 Minutes with Phil. How you doing? I pray you're doing well. And thank you once again for joining me for yet another edition of 5 Minutes with Phil. We are going to take you to the book of Psalms today, Psalm chapter 77. And we're going to look at verses 9 through 12. Now, the writer of this psalm in particular seems to be going through a really rough spell here. A really difficult time personally, and it seems emotionally as well. Now, I say that so that we can understand that the things that we go through, a lot of the gospel writers, a lot of the writers in the Psalms, a lot of the great heroes that are all over the Bible, they went through some of the things that we go through as well. They have some of the doubts, they have some of the fears, they have some of the problems that we have. And the question is, okay, how do we deal with that? Take a look at how this psalm goes. Psalm 77, beginning of verse 9, it says, "Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he slammed the door on his compassion? And I said, this is my fate. The Most High has turned his hand against me. But then I recall all that you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. They are constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about your mighty works." So for lack of a better term here, the author of this psalm, he is in a spiritual funk, and he's doubting God's graciousness, his grace, his mercy. He's doubting he's doubting God's compassion. He literally says, "Has God slammed the door of his compassion towards me?" And then he goes as far as to say, well, okay, this is what I'm destined for. This is my fate. This is what I'm going to be going through. God's turned his back on me. He's now against me. And let's just pause here, because I've met a number of people who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ who you get these feelings. And because we are so wired to know the truth about what God has to say, a lot of times then we will like feel guilty, and what happens, we sink deeper into that hole, we sink deeper into that funk, and we think that God doesn't care, that God doesn't want to hear from us, that he's turned his back on us. And maybe you're there now. What do? The way that he finishes our scripture here tells us what we need to do. Again, he says, "But then I recall all that you've done, God. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. They're constantly in my thoughts, and I cannot stop thinking about your mighty work." So here's the deal. We got to train the brain. We got to train the brain. When our thoughts start sinking to those depths, and we can find ourselves easily in just this terrible state of depression if we're not careful. And we just sink lower and lower and lower into the depths of our despair and our doubts and all these other feelings that they're not of God. It's the enemy trying to destroy us. What do? We need to think back to what God's done for us in the past. And the problem with a lot of us is the fact that we are kind of, well, what have you done for me lately, God, type people. If we're uncomfortable now, we forget what he's done for us even last week. If we're uncomfortable now, we forget how he answered our prayer a year ago, a month ago. We forget what the Lord's done in the past. And the solution, understand this, the solution to these funks and the solution to our minds going places that we shouldn't go is to train our brain to understand what God has done in the past. I remember it. I focus on not what he hasn't done. I focus on what he has done. Let me try to say that again. I don't focus on what the Lord hasn't done yet. I focus on what he has done. And that'll build my faith. That'll raise me up out of that pit. And so if you're there today, if you're in that pit, can I really caution you and really advise you? I want you to think back to when he saved you. I want you to think back to when he answered your prayer. I want you to think back when he came through for you. Because the same God who did it before is the same God who'll do it again for you today. Let's train the brain. Okay, gotta let you go. Thanks for joining me. I hope that blessed you today. We love you, and Lord willing, we'll talk to you next time, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.